Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy that so many people are interested in this topic. It really is one of intrigue. And you might wonder, what makes art so valuable that people steal it, they art nap it, they use it as bargaining chips, they want to get money for it. And why do we pay millions of dollars for a piece of canvas that has some oil on it? So I'm going to introduce you to some art thefts. Each one is unique. The reasons are unique, the history is unique. But the reason there's so much art theft is that art has always meant power. It's meant wealth. Art is the signature of culture and civilization. I mean, Louis XIV bankrupted France. The Vatican bankrupted their coffers by just making art and having it done for them. It's just really amazing. But not only do people steal canvas with a little bit of oil on it, they also steal megalithic objects like this bronze by Henry Moore was stolen in the middle of the night and melted down, unfortunately, but we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So because art is so valuable, more money changes hands illegally, only in drugs and arms. There's more art theft, about $10 billion a year. It happens every year in art. Now, $80 billion is done in art sales every year. You might always hear about those big deal auctions that are going on. And so there really is a lot of money behind art. Most art thefts happen in Italy, as you can see, the least amount in the USA. And as you walk through the museums throughout your life, you might realize that 20% of that art in art museums is forged. That's just recently come out. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the three types of art theft. They've been categorized this way, in that there's the art, the cave hit. And the cave hit happens when a thief is commissioned to steal a particular work of art and bring it back to someone who's willing to pay an exorbitant price for it. And it stays in their vault, their basement, their man cave, or whatever it is. It's in a private underground collection. The second form of art theft is called the fire sale. And the fire sale is when the thief steals a work of art and wants to flip it right away, right? Well, artwork flipped is usually worth about 10% of its value. So if a work of art is worth $5 million, the thief can only figure on getting, what, $500,000 for it. This usually happens when a thief targets a house, a wealthy person's house, and goes in after jewelry and things, and just happens to see some valuable artwork on the wall, tucks it under his arm and leaves. Then there's the long bet, and that's when a thief holds on to that work of art that he stole until the trail goes cold. Then he figures he can sell it later, and maybe he can say, oh, he bought it at a garage sale, or he inherited it and he has no paperwork. Well, the statute of limitations on art is 20 years. So if you've got 20 years to wait, you can just all of a sudden, I'll say, oh, look at this Van Gogh. I just found that in mom's basement or something. And there's a lot of other very complex legal issues about the statute of limitations. I'm not going to go into all of those right now. Let's say you have insurance on your painting. Well, it gets stolen and then the insurance company will pay for it. But then the insurance company owns it. So if it does surface, you don't get your painting back unless you want to buy it back from the insurance company. And what they do is they'll charge you the market value plus all of the costs that were involved in dealing with it. But only 10 to 15% of artwork is ever returned. But great art has shown up at flea markets and galleries, museums, private collections. Many of them don't have a sale of provenance, and that's where whoever has possession of it now is in big trouble. Great art has been found in lead boxes, in forests, buried in farmhouses. Some have been found in the backseat of cars. Anyway, some are intact and some definitely need repairs, and sometimes they've been damaged beyond repair. The two most famous works of art that have been stolen, of course, are the Mona Lisa and the Scream. The interesting thing about the Mona Lisa, it was stolen twice, and so was the Scream. But when they found that the Mona Lisa back in 1913, it had been stolen, been gone from the Louvre in 1910, actually a guard take it. You're going to find that most of these jobs are insider jobs. But anyway, this theft of the Mona Lisa gave her worldwide fame. Everybody knew about the Mona Lisa, that she'd been stolen and they were looking at it. And of course, it was found under the bed of a guard at the Louvre. And the piece itself right now is worth at least $620 million. But would the Louvre ever sell the Mona Lisa? I don't think so. Now the scream, now this is another interesting story. Again, I said it's been stolen a couple times. The last time it was stolen by a couple of thugs. They went in there, they took it real quick. They almost damaged it, and they wanted to bargain for a lighter sentence in a bank robbery. Well, that didn't happen, and they still got 7 years in jail for selling it and trying to give it back for that bartering. But you can see that this recovered version sold for $120 million. So it's not really, chump change. Just this last Monday, a Van Gogh was stolen on the eve of his 167th birthday. Thieves went into the Singer Larsen Museum, Lauren Museum, and that's just outside of Amsterdam. And they broke in the early morning. What they did is they destroyed a electric panel that broke down the security system. They went into the museum, they grabbed, as you can see, they broke through that door, they grabbed this painting. And this is, of course, a very early Van Gogh. It's oil on paper, so it's only worth $6 million. It's not on canvas. You can tell that it's a very early one because it's all in the gray tones, the muted tones. This is actually the garden outside of the church where his father was in charge of the flock. So it's very meaningful to Vincent, and it was too bad that it was stolen. The quote from the director of the Singer Lauren Museum said that he was really pissed off about it. That's a direct quote. I didn't make that one up. Another recent theft was in January 2020. This is a theft that the Scotland Yard is still working on. Dali's work was taken from the museum, some of his sculptures and his prints. But the interesting thing, 17 pieces were taken. The thieves did not take any paperwork with them. So if you do try to sell something without provenance, you're not going to get very far because no one wants to touch it. Eventually, they'll find out that that was stolen property. And it's a law that if you feel like you have stolen property, you have to turn it in or you can be prosecuted as well. So these still are missing. Another thing that of Dali's that was stolen and returned was this golden egg here on an outdoor statue in Vancouver. Vancouver people were really upset about it. And I think they shamed the thief into returning that golden egg. You have to remember that golden egg or an egg was the symbol of rebirth for Salvador Dali. So it was really critical to that work of art. Now, what's not so lucky is last fall, this $20,000 quick drawing, this quick sketch by Dali was stolen from a San Francisco art gallery. The thug just walked into the gallery, took it right off an easel and just headed out for the door, walked out the door. It still has not been found, but there's no leads on it as well. So you can see this $10 billion of stolen art is mounting up really quickly, just in the last year. Now, sometimes Hollywood will glorify art theft and everything else, I guess. But this was the subject of the Thomas Crown affair. And this is Monet's San Giorgio at dusk. The interesting thing about this piece is this was when Monet was in Venice. This did not live at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, where the theft supposedly occurred in the Thomas Crown affair. It actually lives in Wales. But this is a scene from that movie. And this wouldn't or couldn't happen in the United States because in the US, we have very high security system. Not only do you get your bags checked as you walk in, but the size of your bags aren't that big as well. Plus, every painting has a cord that will alert people if anybody even touches it or gets close to it. An alarm will go off. I've been guilty of that, not stealing, but getting too close to the painting. And in the movie, as you might remember, a bunch of thieves dressed up like the Son of Man, which is a Magritte painting, and skittered around the museum to confuse the people on security cameras. So I liked how they included another piece of art in that movie, but that couldn't happen at the Met. It'd be really unusual if it tried to. Now, another recent find, just in March 2019, was this Picasso. This Picasso is a portrait of Picasso's lover, which was Dora Maar. He kept this painting at his side until he died in 1973. So it was very precious to Picasso. After he died, it was auctioned off to a Saudi prince. The prince kept it on his yacht. Well, when his yacht was being refurbished in the south of France, it disappeared. So the prince got back on board, didn't find his Picasso. It disappeared for 20 years. And Arthur Brand, who's a very famous detective in Europe, found it just recently. And he found this beautiful piece wrapped up in black garbage bags. Now, Arthur Brand, he's an art collector as well, but his main business is based on consulting with people who want to buy great works of art or very expensive works of art. And he does so to make sure that people aren't buying forgeries. And also he works very consistently with families that had their work stolen by the Nazis during World War II, which there is a 100-year leniency on finding that work of art. So there's no statute of limitations except for 100 years on anything stolen by the Nazis. So he's out there all the time finding great works of art. He found these two things. So they call him the Indiana Jones of the art world. This is a Dali, that's a Tamareka. He also found Hitler's horses. So Brand found these horses that were commissioned by Hitler to adorn his new chancellery. These horses are 11 feet tall. They weigh absolutely tons and tons and tons. And how Arthur found them is he got a tip. He posed as a really wealthy Dallas art collector, kind of after JR and Dallas, whatever. And so he kept getting these tips on where he could buy these horses. And some of those tips fell through. He actually used drones over Germany to find these things in someone's backyard. Now, these horses have quite a history as well. I think, yeah, here's another shot. This is how big they are, kind of give you an idea of scale. But when the Soviets came to Germany at the downfall of Hitler, Hitler loved these horses so much he had them moved out of Berlin in 34, I believe. And they went out to the Soviet camp after the war. And they kind of moved around, got sold around. The Russians, however, used them for target practice. I don't know if you can see the bullet holes in their shoulders or not. So there's all kinds of interesting stories about this, but let's go back in time. Art theft is as old as time. Egyptian grave robbers were a professional group. They trained one generation to another on how to rob great Egyptian treasure troves. So even from 3000 BCE, we have noted a lot of Egyptian thefts. More recently, however, in 2010, we saw the Cairo Museum pillaged from a wealth of artifacts. Especially King Tut's work was in danger. And this is how the Cairo Museum looked after it had been broken into. It was really quite sad. We saw it before this, right before this actually. This is still missing. This is King Tut, one of his pieces that was buried with him. This is King Tut in the afterlife. They envisioned him fishing on the water. It's invaluable. They have found and returned some of these 18 damaged artifacts from that museum. More recently, however, Cairo has been asking the British back for the Rosetta Stone and the Germans back from Nefertiti. These things are invaluable artifacts from the Egyptian collection. The one thing that they didn't get, let me go back here, where is he? Was the mask of King Tut. There he is. When we were there, they had a special room with just these King Tut artifacts, and that room was jam-packed. You could barely move around the showcases. It was hermetically sealed. The cases were in great shape, unlike the rest of the museum. But the reason the thieves didn't get away with this is it's 30 pounds of pure gold. Luckily, it was just a little bit too heavy for them to get away with. So this is what the people of Cairo have built now. They have built this grand Egyptian museum with high security, and I'm really anxious to go back and see what they've done with it. Okay, let's go a little fast forward and go to World War II. So roughly 600,000 paintings and artifacts were stolen by the Nazis. They looted every European country they could possibly get into. There's about 100,000 that are still missing. Maybe you've seen Monuments Men, maybe you've seen that documentary, The Rape of Europa. They're just fascinating. We have to remember that the Nazis destroyed a lot of artwork that they didn't agree with. They didn't like any modern works of art. They destroyed everything, recordings, photographs, books. But as far as the artwork goes, there's still, the Louvre has just recently started to put up all the artwork that they believe could have been looted by the Nazis, in hopes that people will come by and they'll remember these paintings and make some kind of claim to them. And here's a salt mine image with the artwork. The lucky thing about the salt mines is they were dry, and so they didn't damage the artwork at all. Everybody in the city of Paris went out to strip the Louvre of its paintings and transport them out of the city before the Nazis got there. But there was quite a bit of art looting going on in the city of Paris. They couldn't save everything. Here's some of the loot stacked up. Just a huge art theft. And these are some images from the degenerate art show that Hitler put on about modern paintings. So he put up modern paintings, and he'd even write on the wall. He'd come through the gallery and he'd write on the wall, "These people are insane, don't look at their artwork." The only problem was, because of he giving them so much attention, this art show was the most widely attended Germany had ever seen. You have to remember that Adolf Hitler was a discouraged art student. So he got back at everybody. So here's some more of the artwork that's still missing, that was looted. Remember, all of his generals wanted to be like the Führer, and they started their own art collections. This Raphael portrait, some say that it was a self-portrait, but it's probably worth over 100 million now, but they have not retrieved this one. Raphael, as you might remember, is a contemporary of Michelangelo, worked alongside of him in the Vatican. He did the School of Athens while Michelangelo was doing the Sistine Chapel. This Van Gogh is still missing. You know, Van Goghs go from anywhere from, 55 million to $100 million. It's still missing. This eighth wonder of the world, this amber room, which was made for Catherine the Great in one of her little palaces outside of St. Petersburg, is missing. The Russians tried to protect it, but the Germans went in and they looted the entire room. We still don't know where any of those pieces are today. This Michelangelo is still missing, the head of the faun. And this Vermeer, which would be well worth over hundreds of millions of dollars. Vermeer only did 35 paintings in his lifetime, so this would be incredible. It's called The Astronomer, and it's still missing. So we're hoping that we can find these. Now, Hildebrand Gerdlet was an interesting fellow in that at first he worked with the Nazis in the 1930s, collecting artwork. He was an art historian, so he was giving his expertise to them about what they should buy and not, or take and not. And he also amassed a lot of artwork. But then he broke with the Nazis, but that reputation always followed him around. Unfortunately, you can read on the internet about this man and see if you think he was guilty or innocent with all of his collecting of the artwork. He got a lot of it back. His son, because his father's reputation was besmirched during his lifetime, instead of leaving his father's art collection anywhere in Germany, he left it to Switzerland. So you can see his collection, his marvelous collection, in Bern. Okay, another thing that the Nazis stole was the Bruges Madonna. Bruges is in Belgium, and this was the only Michelangelo sculpture to leave Italy. So you can imagine how valuable it was to all the people of Belgium. Michelangelo was commissioned by two very wealthy Bruges businessmen to do this sculpture for one of their churches. It's been very popular through the ages. In fact, Napoleon stole it, but it was returned. And then the World War II Nazis stole it. They wrapped it up in a mattress, a Red Cross mattress, I believe, and took it back to Germany. It then, too, was later returned. It was found in a salt mine. This piece, luckily, was returned undamaged. This is Da Vinci's Girl with an Ermine, and it was really considered the first modern portrait. It is back in Krakow, Poland now. But if you look at what Da Vinci did, is he created a mystique around this portrait. It's not just your typical Renaissance portrait where oftentimes they just did profiles, but she's looking off in the distance, and her little pet Ermine is looking off in the distance too. So who's coming toward them? She was a very brilliant poet and orator that the Duke of Milan had as a mistress, and it's almost like she's looking toward the Duke coming at her. They call it a modern portrait because it has action, and you know that Da Vinci always included his observational skills with his fantastic, fantasy skills. So it was a pivotal piece. Now, the Night Watch in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam there's always 10 million art critics out of work. And this has been vandalized quite a bit. But during World War II, what the Dutch did is they cut it out of its frame. So you'll notice that it's unusually cropped. I mean, there's some people that are like half bodies in there, rolled up and hidden during World War II. The Dutch didn't want the Nazis to take it, obviously. But after it was reinstated, the people have attacked it. One man attacked it with a paring knife, and the thing was so heavily varnished that the knife wouldn't go through the paint or the varnish, and it kind of bounced back. It's just crazy. And some woman attacked it. And right now you just can't get that close to it, which is a very smart thing. And so obviously some people didn't like it. And we'll discuss more of that in my next lecture, which is Censorship in Art presentation later this month. This Da Vinci's never been recovered as well. This beautiful drawing, red chalk drawing of St. John the Baptist. And as you can see, there's a lot of motion here too in telling a story as he's pointing out of the picture plane and the way his body's positioned. It's classical Greek sculpture. I mean, the man did a fabulous job of creating that particular image. So we're glad those Da Vinci's are back. Another bone of contention that's still going on, just like the Egyptian controversy, is the Elgin marbles that live in London. Now they're called the Elgin marbles, but they're actually the Parthenon frieze. This is a monumental theft that is still in contention 200 years later. So you have Lord Elgin. He's sailing over to Greece, and he's dealing with the Ottoman Empire leaders that were in power at the time. And he said, I kind of like those. I've got a place back in England. I could put those up around my estate. And so he bought them. So he put them on ships. One sank. It took 2 years to recover that one. But most of the Elgin marbles made it back to Great Britain. But then, he was going through this nasty divorce and had to sell them. So he had to sell them to the British Museum, who reluctantly took them. Unfortunately, the British Museum started trying to scrape off some of those colors they saw in the cracks. And they did more damage than good by trying to clean them. Actually, you probably all know this, but they were painted vividly in red, white, and blue originally. And what they were trying to do is scrape out, unbeknownst to them, encaustic paint that the Greeks originally painted them in. The Brits, just like the artists of the Renaissance, thought that the Greeks just did bare marble. Anyway, so these are the marbles as they are instated now in the British Museum. Beautiful. And the Greeks wanted them back. So they created a new museum, the Acropolis Museum in Athens. And they have all these spaces just ready to put the original Parthenon frieze back. And so what the Brits did to kind of satisfy their need to have their marbles back is they gave them these plaster casts, horribly done plaster casts of what they had in the British Museum. Then the University of Illinois, where I was teaching, had the most complete and most beautiful replica in the world of the Parthenon frieze. So I get to take my students in every semester and show them the delicacy and the multi-talented of the Greeks in Parthenon. Too bad that Athens doesn't have such a good set. So you can see the difference between those garish white, non-detailed Parthenon compared to the ones we have at the University of Illinois. All right, enough of that. I will talk more about a more recent theft, which happened in Boston in 1990. I was there right before it happened, and it really is an incredible museum. Isabella Stewart Gardner said, "I am leaving my museum and my artwork to you with the stipulation that nothing changes. Nothing will ever change about my museum. So everything is just in place as she left it, except it's missing some paintings." In 81 minutes, the thieves went through that museum and stole over $500 million worth of paintings, cut from their frames. Again, these thieves are on the FBI's most wanted list. They have offered huge rewards. The museum wants them back. $10 million, no questions asked, never got a response. None of the offers have been taken. They think the work got stolen by the Irish mafia. Irish are big in Boston, right? And they think that Whitey Bulger had something to do with it, but they'll never get anything out of him because he was imprisoned and then killed in prison at the age of 89. So it's just really amazing, the intrigue, the complexity of all of these art thefts. So here we have another Vermeer stolen. They probably think the concert is worth at least $200 million if anyone would ever sell it, which the Gardner would not. So now the FBI is offering full immunity if the artwork is returned voluntarily. But if they find it in your possession, or if you try to steal it, you are going to jail for an awfully long time. This was in the collection as well. It's the only seascape that Rembrandt ever did, the Sea of Galilee. They also took a Manet portrait painting. She had a good eye, Isabella. And here as the museum stands today with the empty frames on the wall, just waiting to put those fantastic artworks back, pivotal to our culture and our civilization. So here's like a little schematic of how the thieves went through the museum. Of course, they tied up the guards. They think maybe it could have been an inside job. I don't know. It'll be a mystery. Who knows if it'll ever be solved. Now, this is another cute little story. It has a happy ending. This is the 1991 Van Gogh Museum. 4 paintings were stolen. Big, important paintings worth about $500 million. The gang ran away with them. They got in one car. Another part of their gang was going to pick them up in the second car. But the second car got a flat tire. They got nervous and they just fled the scene. And so an hour later, these paintings were found in the backseat of the original car. And so they were actually gone from the museum for only an hour. Thank goodness. That would have been bad news to lose those. Anyway, consider the largest art theft since World War II is the appropriation of the Barnes collection in the city of Philadelphia. Actually, that collection started in Marion, Pennsylvania, but Dr. Albert Barnes was a brilliant doctor and chemist who sold his patent for a wonderful drug that would help with syphilis. He sold it. Right after that, penicillin was invented. So, he had all his money and he started collecting artwork that really no one else was interested in. The Met wasn't buying any Impressionist paintings. Other major museums around the world weren't really. So he started collecting these. And everybody made scathing reviews like, oh, Dr. Barnes, you're crazy buying all that work. Anybody could do that work. It looks unfinished. It's, you know, too bohemian. And so he said, fine, you don't like my artwork? When I'm gone, I'm going to leave it to someone else. The city of Philadelphia will not touch my artwork. Well, guess what? When he died, this was his lovely building that he designed for the original collection. The city of Philadelphia started working on it. You know, how are we going to get that collection? Because they realized that by that time, he died in, what, 61 was it? By that time, they knew how invaluable that collection was. He has more Renoirs in that collection than the entire city of Paris. He has Picassos, he has El Grecos, he has Matisses. In fact, Henri Matisse went over and did a whole wall mural for him. Oh, that's what he invented, art Giral. Anyway, this is the original gallery in Marion. So you can see what they did on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, downtown Philadelphia, is they replicated the interior perfectly. Dr. Barnes himself was responsible for placement of every little thing in his museum. He closed it to any art critic or art historian, and he said, only common people are going to come in and see my work. I want to educate them about art and how important it is in our lives. So Philadelphia went to work, and they did get it. It opened in 2012, and it's a spectacular museum. There is no way anyone could buy the artwork that he did. So here's a Renoir corner. You can see he also coupled it with artifacts from the Pennsylvania Dutch, from great hinges from medieval Paris. I mean, he had everything in there. Here's a Picasso wall. That wall, I can't even estimate how much that wall would be worth. Matisse's. And here's the wall mural that he did on site for Dr. Barnes. Anyway, go see it. Sad how they got it, but it's worth going to see. Now, this is another museum in Cairo, and it has been defined that it has an impressionist collection that would rival any European museum. Well, it's also been thefted twice. So here's Van Gogh's Museum with a Vase. It's worth at least 55 million. It was stolen first in 1978, and then again in 2010. And then there was another heist of 9 other paintings in 2009. So those paintings, the ones in 2009, they were dumped outside of the museum walls. But the first time Van Gogh was stolen, back in 78, it was found in Kuwait. And the second time, it was found in the Cairo airport. The thieves were leaving, and the guards stopped them with this painting. And they were, the 2 thieves were Italians. I guess the Italians wanted to bring that Dutch painting back. I don't know. But luckily, that has a happy ending. Let's think about why artwork is so expensive. What defines a masterpiece? Let's just scroll through a few of the most expensive artworks that we've seen to date. So of course you all remember a little more than a year ago when Salvator Mundi went up for auction. That painting itself has an incredible history. How this painting was painted over again and again and again. It ended up in some, Louisiana farmhouse. I mean, it's really quite astounding. But once they cleaned it up, it took 2 years restoration. Some critics have verified it as a Da Vinci, of course. This is the savior of the world, Salvator Mundi. It sold to a Saudi prince for $450.3 million at auction. Now I could go at length about how we can verify that this is a Da Vinci, but I'm going to keep going on the real expensive pieces. Interchange by Willem de Kooning, a very prominent abstract expressionist in mid-20th century, sold for $300 million. Now remember that, because I'm going to talk about de Kooning in a little bit. But, you know, Cézanne's card players, which one of them is in the Barnes collection. just sold for 274 million. And Cezanne did a few of these card player paintings. So it's like, okay. Gauguin's When Will I Marry sold for 210 million. It's a beautiful piece. Arbitrary Color, it's another one of those pivotal pieces. Post-Impressionist piece by Paul Gauguin. Jackson Pollock sold his 17A for 200 million. Pollock doesn't have there weren't a whole lot of those paintings, so of course they're very expensive, and some of them even weigh like 500 pounds, so you get a lot of paint for your money. Okay, a Picasso. I'm going to talk about this one in my censorship lecture later this month as well, because of censorship. I guess there's just too many things in there, but anyway, Picasso sold for 197. This Mark Rothko, very tortured artist, he lamented that he never have the fame that he deserved. And I think he'd be quite pleased with the price of that particular painting. Now, there's only 2 paintings in this whole list of top 12 that are not 20th century. Have you gathered that by now? We've got Salvador Mundi, and we also have this Rembrandt dual portraits that's sold for 180 million. The rest of the pieces are 20th century works of art that are going for these phenomenal prices. Here's a Modigliani. He happens to have the reputation of being the most forged artist, but this particular painting, which I'll talk about in a censorship lecture, when that gallery, the Paris gallery that showcased this particular piece along with some other Modigliani's, the cops came in and shut it down because it was too pornographic. So I'll tell you more about that story later, but that sold for 170.4. Liechtenstein for 165 million. I think he'd be very pleased. Here's another Pollock for 165. Here's another de Kooning for 162. And Lorev was recently sold by Steve Wynn. You know, he's the Las Vegas magnate. He sold it at auction for 135 million. Well, he was there at the auction. He was so excited about it. He went up with the buyer for the 135 million, and he got so excited, he put his elbow through the canvas. So then the sale was null and void, of course. He had it repaired, and then later it sold for $155 million. It's because it's got a story behind it. Everybody loves a good story. You're going to spend, another $10 million if this is a good story. I don't know. Here we go. Everybody knows the story about this. This is Adele Bloch-Bauer. This portrait was done by Gustav Klimt in the early 20th century. This was taken by the Nazis. It lived in Vienna for years. It was like Vienna's Mona Lisa. Everybody went to see this beautiful piece. And the family kept fighting for it. They said, no, that belongs to my family. There's no provenance, there's no bill of sale. And it was finally returned to the family for $135 million. She turned around and sold that to the Lauder Foundation for she should have held out for more, I think, because Oprah had bought this other Adele Bloch-Bauer painting by Gustav Klimt. She bought that in 2006 for almost $88 million. Then she turned around and sold it again, 11 years later for $150 million. Well, they're both beautiful paintings. Anyway, Elaine Wynn, the divorced woman from Steve Wynn, bought this very large triptych by Francis Bacon for just $142 million. Now, the good part of it is that since she's on the board of the LACMA, she's promised to leave that to the LACMA. And just kind of an interesting little aside, in the United States, if you buy a painting for like $142 million, and you have written it in your will that you will let it go to an art museum, or you'll donate it to the art museum after you're gone, you don't have to pay tax on it. So what would the tax be on 142 million? And finally, this Basquiat, another 20th century artist, sold recently for $110 million. So those are valuable. None of them have been stolen that we know of to date, but that's the value of these artworks. I wanted to show you this as I keep talking about provenance. If you don't have the paperwork and provenance of an artwork, you are not probably going to be able to sell it. It would have to be one of those cave hits where the buyer would buy it even though they think it was stolen. But this is the provenance record, as you can see, every little detail, every sale of it. And this is to this painting that recently sold for $84 million by Claude Monet. If we go back to the provenance record, you can see that the Norton Simon man and wife bought it in what, 1968. And then they sold it to Sotheby's. And then you can see the prices go up and up and up and up from there. But that's what you need to sell a great work of art, is provenance. Now, there's still 350,000 works of art that are still lost. And like I mentioned earlier, only 10 to 15% will be ever returned. This is a Van Gogh. This is the Vienna's new Mona Lisa, something everyone wants to come and see. And it's Cellini's salt cellar. Now, the salt that held salt. It's about 10 inches by 13 inches. It's mostly gold. It's worth 65 million, as the slide says. And you might wonder who Cellini was. Cellini was actually a pupil of Michelangelo. You can probably see that in the very Renaissance-esque forms of those people. They look like Greek sculptures, and they're completely naked. So naturally, they're from the Renaissance. All right. Da Vinci's Yard Winder was stolen from a Scottish castle. You know, these couple of guys were on tour. They took that down off the wall, they stuck it under their coats, and they left. And it is still missing today. Of course, they would really like to have that back because it's a Da Vinci. It's he only did, what, 15 paintings? And so they're very precious. And again, you can see the action and the movement of the Da Vinci. He really set the tone for artists of the future to create more of a storytelling experience. And you can see in the background how nature and human beings are one. So he always felt well-grounded in nature. All right, these panels have a long, illustrious history too. Van Eyck is credited with the invention of oil paint, but some people dispute that. But he and his brother worked on this Ghent art altarpiece. So the brothers Van Eyck demonstrated, again, they kind of led the way to naturalism in art. They led the way for Renaissance artists to really study nature and the human connectedness to it. It's considered a world treasure. Well, earlier, the Calvinists, Napoleon wanted it for himself. The Calvinists wanted to burn it, and the Nazis stole it during World War II. Now, unfortunately, the judges panel, which you're seeing here to the right, is still missing. And so the judges down there on the lower left is where that was. But that's still missing. And they are on the lookout for it anywhere. Now, in 2003, because of the war in the Middle East, we had a lot of looting and sacking of their cultural items as well. So the United States, the FBI sent many agents over there to help track down and rescue Iraqi cultural heritage. Now they have a dedicated museum with a lot of heavy security to protect that artwork. But even today, there's over 100,000 pieces of real or forged Middle Eastern artwork that's on for sale on the internet. So you can go on the internet and you can see these forged items, and some of them might even be real. But they think up to 80% of the artifacts that are on sale online are fakes or looted. Illegal, in other words. But here's their National Museum of Iraq. So you can see the winged horses, the megalithic society that they had. So these are the ones that they're protecting. All right, here's some more variety of missing artworks from around the world. Again, everyone has a different story, some with happy endings, and there's many motivations for stealing art, which I'll go through. Greed and stupidity are probably the most common. Anyway, here's a missing Cézanne landscape. In 1999, during Y2K, this museum was ambushed. What they did is the thieves broke in while everyone else was celebrating New Year's Eve, and they used a smoke bomb throughout the entire museum to hide their identity, and also the guards or whoever looked at the tape afterwards couldn't see who did it or what they took. But then they found that it was a Cézanne landscape. which is really sad. That's still missing. And it was uninsured too. There's a lot of European art that's not insured. These pieces probably were insured. I didn't track that down enough, but Gloria Vanderbilt Whitney, you might know her. She started the Whitney Museum in New York City. She commissioned these large panels in 1916 to decorate her art studio on Long Island. And they were a treasured icon by the artist Matthew Parrish. They moved to West Hollywood, and each panel is about 5.5 feet by 8.5 feet. So their theft was definitely targeted. These thieves came down through the ceiling in this West Hollywood place, and you can, since they were so large, you can tell that they were done by professionals because they had all kinds of ropes and pulleys and everything else. These are valued, as you can see, at over $2 million each, and they have not been recovered. So that's kind of close to home. I already talked to you a little bit about this 2-ton sculpture stolen in the middle of the night of Henry Moore. Henry Moore is known for doing monumental sculpture and volumetric drawings in the 20th century. His work is really known all over the world. This piece, they suspect, was melted down for a total, the bronze was worth about $1,600. And it went overseas. They think that it went to China. Now, why China would want that much bronze, I don't know. But these are some examples of his volumetric drawings, as you might have seen before. All right, this is a great story too. This de Kooning painting, and you saw how valuable de Kooning paintings are in the previous slides. This was stolen from the University of Arizona, as you can see, in 1986. They think it's worth somewhere around $160 million. It was found in, several years later, in somebody's bedroom behind a bedroom door. The only way you could view this painting is if the bedroom door was closed. Well, this New Mexico couple had it in their home, and an estate sale person came through and looked at all of their belongings, and they said, okay, I'll give you $2,000 for everything here. So the heirs got $2,000, and he took all the work and furniture and everything else out of the house, brought it to his estate sale. Some really savvy customer came up to that artwork, and they said, you know, that looks like a de Kooning. They had it authenticated, and since the FBI has this huge database of stolen artwork, and they work with about 194 different countries all over the world, Interpol, they discovered that that was a stolen piece. And they gave it back to the University of Arizona. Of course, they're just delighted to get it. But here's some sketches, police sketches of the 2 thieves that the guards reported that stole that painting under their coats. And as you can see on the right, how much they look like these 2 little old school teachers that lived in that house. And their heirs sold their belongings for $2,000. Anyway, they are suspected of many art crimes that funded their travels in retirement. So, and here it is. So the estate sale dealer gave it back, didn't ask for any money at all, to the University of Arizona. Now we'll go to Rio de Janeiro. This is Matisse's Luxembourg Gardens, just a gorgeous Fauvist piece. That and 2 of Dali's paintings were stolen from Rio, and they have not been returned either. This piece disappeared from New South Wales. It's the Dutch Van Meurs, a small cavalier. They think that it's probably a self-portrait. It's a beautiful Dutch Baroque painting, but from the artist, a self-portrait of the artist. So that's gone, and that's still missing. Now the Zurich theft was the biggest art theft at the time in 2006. And this is I wanted you to see the museum. $163 million worth was stolen. This was the pinnacle of their collection, Cézanne's boy in a red vest. And like I said, it was the most valuable thing that they stole. But luckily, it was found in Serbia by some art detectives. Usually the sting is when they get a tip that some really great artwork is on sale, and so they'll send the police in and they'll pretend like they're buyers and they'll arrest the people right then and there. anyway, Van Gogh's piece was found. This is still in the Zurich Art Museum. This was found in the back seat of a car, along with this Monet. You can see that they were found a couple years later and the value of them. So as we go through all of these fabulous artworks, you can see what a travesty it would be if they were missing forever. Here's a Degas that was done, a man and his two daughters, that's still missing. Now in Rotterdam, they had a big theft. And this is a Gauguin piece, an early Gauguin piece. And here they are searching for clues after the theft. And I thought the interesting thing about this was this art museum is by Rem Koolhaas, which is an internationally known architect. And it's a beautiful place, but it's very hard to protect in that it's all glass. Thieves can look right in, they can target whatever piece they want, they can break in through the glass and leave. Now these thieves were captured in 2013. And so they said, you know, where's the artwork? Where's the artwork? You know, it'll be easier on you if you can bring up the artwork for us. And they said, oh, they denied everything, of course. And one of their mothers said, I was so afraid that my son would be caught that I burned those artworks. And then later during trial, she retracted her statement and said, no, I didn't burn them. But the police, they looked at her fireplace, and they did find bits of canvas and some canvas tacks. So they think she indeed did burn all that valuable artwork. And here's the smattering of what she probably destroyed. Picasso, Gauguin, Francis Bacon, two Monets. Close-ups. That's a Matisse. That's the Bacon. That's the Monets. Okay, this is at Paris Modern Art Museum. The thieves broke through a screen in a window. The guards were kind of sleepy, and they got 5 paintings in 2010. So here we have a Matisse, very much like his Joy of Life. We have a Picasso. We have a Leger. And this one they think was destroyed. This is the stolen Modigliani that they found in that museum. They caught the thieves and they admitted to destroying that particular piece. And as you saw, one just sold for 172 million. All right, now this is another interesting. John Lowe is an American who embezzled a lot of funds from the US government. And so the Swiss police knew about this. They went into his home and they confiscated this Monet painting. This is San Giorgio. Now this painting, of course, is another one from Venice. You might recognize the landmarks. And the great story about that is Monet spent a lot of time doing paintings in Venice. And he said, I have to leave Venice. It is just too beautiful to paint anymore. I have to go back. He was just overwhelmed by the beauty of Venice. So it is worth a lot of money. All right, so here's another Picasso. You know, he's got the most stolen pieces on record. There's like 1,200 Picassos missing, but you have to remember how prolific he was. This is kind of a sad story in that it was stolen from the Athens Art Museum in 2012. And Picasso gifted this piece to the people of Greece because of their brilliant resistance to the Nazis during World War II. He admired them so much that he wanted to give them a gift. And it's still missing. This is another Picasso portrait that you can see. It was stolen from an art gallery in Australia. And they bought it for 1.6 million in 1985, so it was really a good deal. But it was stolen by a bunch of Australian pranksters. They call themselves the Australian Cultural Terrorists. And they demanded that the government give more money supporting the arts and artists. And if their demands weren't met, they were going to burn this Picasso. Well, the government said, no, I'm not playing with you. Go ahead, do whatever you want to do. Well, of course, they didn't want to destroy it. Oh, here's the ransom letter. You can read the conditions that these cultural terrorists wanted. And like I said, the government didn't bend. So those cultural terrorists wrapped it up and put it in a locker in a train station. and it's hanging back up in that Australian art gallery today. They said we never would have heard it. We just wanted to bring to light that artists need more support. All right, quickly. Magritte, this is his museum in Brussels, and I thought it was really clever. The one on the left is his home where he and his wife lived, and this is the museum as it is today in the lower right, and you can see how they've done kind of a surrealist overcoating on that particular building. They wrapped it with another image, but this was stolen. They think that this Magritte painting was actually of his wife, his lovely wife. It was stolen in 2012. There's not a lot of Magrittes missing. For some reason, people don't steal it. They don't try to resell it. I don't know. They don't like surrealists. I don't know. But anyway, the thieves were so embarrassed that they couldn't sell it. They gave it back. Now this one we can't see anymore because it's gone. This Frida Kahlo, she loved what the Soviets were doing at the time, loved communism. She gave this very large mural to them. The Soviets were going to lend it, and en route, it disappeared. So here you can see this piece that she's working on. It's called Adultery. You can see it has her signature characters in it. There's death, there's destruction, there's unhappiness, there's blood, everything. The wounded table. Okay, making a comment about her husband, Diego Rivera, sleeping with her sister. Anyway, her work is so valuable to the Mexican people and the government that they will no longer allow any of her artwork to be sold outside of the country. They consider her a cultural icon. And one of her pieces sold for $8 million, as you can see. This one's not stolen, but I just wanted you to see another Kahlo piece and how much it sold for. She broke all records for a Latin American woman sales. Anyway, her husband, Diego Rivera, also donated something to the Soviets. It's a very large mural, and luckily, it was gone for what, 50 years almost, and they found it in the museum storeroom. I guess they didn't hang it, but probably they wanted it after they knew how important he was later on in the 20th century. Residential theft in Australia. Now we're in the residences part. 18 works of art were stolen from a penthouse. They were only worth a mere $2 million. But the insurance company paid out like $1.2 million. They were found in this man's caretaker's house. This is called Victoria in Moonlight by Charles Blackman. This is called Capricorn Bridges by Tim. Anyway, again, it was an insider job. It was folded up. He also stole 3 of his luxury vehicles. I don't know what he wanted back more, his cars or his artwork. But as you can see, this canvas was folded up. Closer to home, we have the Encino, California art theft of 2008 worth $10 million. The couple who collected this artwork, this is a Chagall, were asleep in their home at the time. Their caretaker had gone out for groceries and didn't lock the door. And so thieves got in, and she came in, she noticed the artwork was stolen. The couple didn't know anything about it. And so they have Riveras, they have Chagalls, they have Hans Hofmann. So there's a happy ending in that 9 years later, the FBI received a tip that some paintings were for sale, and they were going to meet the seller in the Brentwood Hotel, and this guy called Darko was going to sell it. Well, as soon as these paintings popped out, which they knew because they had the database, they arrested him. So that's a good thing. Now, those are the pieces they sold. I'm moving along quickly because if you're interested, Los Angeles Police Department had the only art theft unit in the world. So they had these people dedicated to finding artwork. That it disbanded, so it's no longer there. But you can look this up and you can read all these articles that are known worldwide for how they got stolen artwork back. So hundreds of millions of dollars they retrieved in like over, 20 years. And here's the website. And you can go down and look at all their cases and worldwide newspaper articles about them and what they did. They might have disbanded because the woman you see who was in the unit on the right was convicted of an older murder, and she's now in jail for that. She could find art, but she had to murder her husband's former wife. I don't know. Intriguing how complex they are. Now, a forger, let's see, I see I have about 2 minutes left. This is John Manet. They've written a book about him called Provenance. He's probably the most notorious art forger of all time that we know of. He could replicate any kind of painting you wanted, got together with a gallery owner who convinced him to do these paintings in the style of famous artists and sell them for millions of dollars. Well, the art gallery dealer got in a lot of trouble. John only spent a year in jail. And when he came out, he decided, well, you know, people want my paintings. I will paint them in the style of, as you can see, Van Gogh and Monet. And he sells them up to $50,000, but he has to mark on the painting that they are copies. So he's still making a good living. Here's a couple of Van Goghs that were retrieved recently. As you can see, they're again from his earlier period. He painted this for his father, who was a pastor of the church. You saw the garden earlier. And here are the happy Dutch people that got their work back. One more quick thing, Gauguin at our Getty here in Los Angeles. They have this Gauguin, they thought it was authentic, but then now it's not been authenticated and it's a fake and it's taken out of the galleries, it's in the storage. They said that Gauguin never signed it. Well, he didn't sign a lot of these things, but the wooden base was just off, something he would never use. But you can understand why they thought it was a Gauguin, because here's a drawing of a very similar character. So the Getty, they think they spent, Getty never tells you how much money they spend on their artwork, but they think they spent about $3 million for that piece, and now it's in the basement. Okay, the Bible Museum. The Hobby Lobby founder spent $500 million to put the Bible Museum up in Washington, D.C. And then he started to collect Dead Sea Scrolls, Iraqi artifacts. But the problem was they bought illegal artifacts from the Middle East. They paid $3 million fine, and they had to return all 3,800 objects back to the Iraqis. So it's kind of sad. But here's some, they had cuneiform, they had Dead Sea Scrolls. And how they found out that these were not really the original Dead Sea Scrolls is that is some really old leather. They think maybe it came from an old, leather Roman shoes or something. Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the authentic ones, weren't done on leather. They were done on this parchment paper that had a coating on it. And they also realized they were fakes because the ink did not soak into the fiber. It kind of rolled down the edge of that ancient leather. So they knew that it wasn't. Moving on, this is funny. Maurizio Cattelan made this golden toilet. Well, it was first exhibited in New York City, and people could take their turn and they could go in and use it, you know, it was private. Then it went to Great Britain, and they put it in another gallery and people could use it, you know, $1 million gold toilet. The thieves went in one night and they got it. He is the same artist who did the famous banana taped to a wall. Now that sold for a mere $120,000. But that, everybody was really in an outrage about that. Kind of fun. Anyway, this painting recently was found. This is a Signet painting, and it was, he's the same genre, pointillism, as Seurat. Here's a close-up. But luckily it was returned. It was found in the Ukraine, and they think that it was they found it in the home of a Kiev man who was being investigated for killing a jeweler. So they went in to arrest him as a murderer, but they found out this stolen painting. The most recent heist, this is my last one actually, jewelry heist in Germany in November, $1 billion worth of jewels. Now the problem with jewels is these can be broken apart and sold. They had absolutely no insurance because no one could ever estimate their value, I guess until it was stolen, $1 billion. It's the oldest museum in Europe. These are cultural art objects because they were collected by, of course, king. This is how they're usually displayed. They would have gotten a lot more of those jewels out of that case, except some of them were sewn into the cloth background. So they couldn't get but $1 billion worth. Luckily, another lucky thing is this famed 10-carat green diamond was on loan to the Metropolitan in New York City, so they couldn't get it. So there's the Dresden art heist. And then here's forgeries and thefts, and it just continues today. And the interesting thing about all this is if somebody steals a work of art, it's really hard to estimate the worth or the value in the future. Because like de Kooning hardly sold any work when he was alive. Van Gogh certainly didn't. And now their work goes for hundreds of millions of dollars. So I hope you have some questions that I can answer. I have enjoyed giving this lecture. However, I do enjoy a live audience. So I really hope I see you all at the museum at some point in the near future. But later on this month, I'm going to do a censorship and art lecture. It's kind of X-rated, so adults only. If you have any questions about that, put them in our chat room as well. Okay, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. I'm here to answer questions.